Hey, I'm David, and this is just a quick little explanation using Play-Doh about how the definition of integration works. So what I'm going to start with is a rectangle. Well, it's approximately a rectangle. Rectangles are nice. I can find the area of a rectangle if I measure what this is and measure what this is and multiply them together. I'll get the area of a rectangle. So rectangles are kind of nice. Other shapes, you can figure out what their area is by turning them into rectangles. So this lovely triangle here, if I cut it in just the right spot, about there, then it should be possible to join that back together. Not particularly well done, maybe I should have done my cut in a better spot. If I cut that in just the right spot, I should be able to join that back together to turn this into a rectangle. And now that means that I knew how wide it was here, and I can figure out how high this is, and that means I can figure out the area of the original triangle. So turning things into rectangles is kind of a nice thing to do. This trapezium here, well, I could do just the same sort of trick. Let's see, about there. And join that on there, and my trapeziums become a nice little rectangle, well, close enough. And I can measure this distance and multiply it by this distance, and that'll give me the area of my original trapezium. Okay. Problem is, what if your shape is a bit more complicated? What if it's not a nice straight lines on the edge of it? What if it's more like this sort of thing? This one's helpfully pretty much flat on the bottom. So that distance there wouldn't be the worst thing to measure. But the question is, can I turn it into a rectangle to make it easier to multiply, to find the area? And with Play-Doh I can. I can just squish and squish this, keeping it the same thickness. And there totally is a rectangle which has the right area. This rectangle has the right area. It's the same area as my original shape. So all I'd need to do is figure out what this height is and multiply them together, and that would tell me the original area. The big issue is, though, well, without using Play-Doh, if all I had was a drawing of the area, how would I figure out the exact correct height to use to make my area as a rectangle? That's the really tricky bit. Well, let's go back to another shape. So this shape has still got all made out of straight lines, and I could do the same trick that I did before by smooshing it into a rectangle. But what I want to do is in such a way to be able to figure out the area. What I could do is cut it into two pieces like this, and turn each of those separately into a rectangle. And there's nothing stopping me using two smaller rectangles to calculate the area. Each of these can be calculated by measuring here and multiplying, and this one can be done as well, and all I have to do is add them together and it gives me the area of my original shape. Okay, so maybe I could do that with my curved shape. Well, what if I cut it here and maybe here and maybe here? I could turn each of those into a rectangle, and then that would give me an idea. I'd be able to calculate the area. So this one's nearly a triangle. It's not quite though. So I can smudge this into a rectangle. This one's nearly a rectangle already. I can smudge this one into a rectangle, and I can smudge this one into a rectangle. And so those 4 rectangles should add up to the area of my shape. But I've got the same problem I had before. I don't know what the exact right height is to use to make this rectangle, because I did it by smudging. Now this one wasn't too bad. It was already nearly rectangle shaped. And this one wasn't too bad. I didn't have to change it by very much to turn it into a rectangle. So maybe what I need to do is make my cuts in a certain way so I wouldn't change the area very much if I turned it into a rectangle, and I can just keep the heights that are already there. So what if I cut it into really small bits? Now each of those ones isn't very far from being a rectangle. I can smudge them all a little bit. Smudge a bit up and a bit down, and it's not all that far from being a rectangle. And now my area can be all those rectangles. All I need is a good approximation, a good estimate for how high my smudged rectangle is going to be. And since these slices are pretty small, I can probably just pick one of the heights that was already there to be the height of the rectangle. And what I can imagine is that if I did these slices really, really thin, I could just pick, any height I wanted in that teeny tiny area. And so maybe just, pick the left-hand one as an idea, or the right-hand one, or maybe the middle one. Shouldn't really matter. I could pick whichever one I wanted, and it should come out to the area if I cut it, a pretty good close idea of the area if I cut it into enough pieces. So that's my idea of the definition of integration by adding up a whole lot of little slices using Play-Doh.